What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Blade Dive. I'm stoked you're tuned in, and if you're here for the first time, make sure that you're subscribed to the podcast if you like what you're listening to. I do have a couple housekeeping things really quick before we jump into the interview and I introduce our guest. First things first, if you have a hiring manager that is interested in advertising on the podcast for jobs that they're hiring for, let's talk. It's a really cool opportunity to have them come on the podcast, do a pre-interview interview with me, and you're basically buying airtime at that point. It's an awesome opportunity for your leadership team to differentiate yourselves from other resorts and have your leadership team talk about what it's like to work for them. Pretty dope. Don't know of anybody else doing it, so just throwing it out there. We can be reached on social media at The Blade Dive or via email. We're at Gmail, so that's thebladedive@gmail.com. Second, now is a really great time for me to thank our sponsor, Prenoth. This podcast is presented by them. Huge thank you to them for their support. Okay, my guest today is Kristin Lenart. And if you don't know Kristin has worked at a couple different resorts in the Northeast, but specifically right now, she is employed with Blue Mountain and is rocking it for them. I mean, absolutely crushing it. Mountain bike trails, terrain parks, fabrication work. I don't think there's much she does not do for the resort, to be honest with you. But she's also spent time out west at June Mountain in California. She has been a part of several cutters camps and treasures those experiences, not just for the time that she was on snow, but just the ability to really kind of figure out what it's like to be in the industry around people that have been in the game for quite some time. This episode is another deep one. We talk about what it means to be authentic, not necessarily just with everyone else that you work with, but yourself. We discuss what it's like being comfortable in your own skin, the ratio of male park managers to female park managers, and how we fix that. It's a really awesome conversation, and I'm glad you're tuned in to listen. Okay, you know the deal. If you're at home, grab your favorite drink, kick your feet up, and if you're in the machine anywhere in the world, turn up the volume. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Blade Dive. I've got to be really honest. Today's guest with me in the booth was someone that I met very early on in my career. She has spent time in a machine. She's worked on the ground, boots on the ground, running excavators. She can do it all. Specifically out of Pennsylvania at Blue Mountain, but has spent a lot of time in Cutters Camp, or at Cutters Camp rather, and also at June Mountain in California among some legendary names, and I'm sure has taken that knowledge back to the East Coast to do whatever she can to make an impact, and that is Kristin Lenart. Welcome to the show, Kristin. How you doing?
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate those kind words.
Well, you know the deal. We kick this thing off with a special guest question. Ruben Cameron is your first special guest question. I'm stoked he's contributed. Shout out to him for doing that all the way from the land down under. I will go ahead and play it for you now. Here we go.
Kristin, how are you? Seems like a lifetime ago that we worked together, so I hope things are well. Just wanting to know your perspective on working both East and West Coast. Obviously, the snow quantity and quality is probably one of the biggest changes there, one of the biggest differences. But after starting at the east side and then going over west, what was a few of the things you took away from that?
Well, first off, hey Ruben, it's been a while. It's good to hear your voice. Secondly, one of the biggest things was how to work with changing snow conditions, because honestly, the snow on the East Coast is kind of garbage to begin with and garbage throughout. So you kind of know what you're working with, and working in like a 4 to 12 o'clock, which I was totally new to. The snow changes throughout, and as the sun sets and you're high elevation, it's definitely a different game to play, that's for sure. It was a learning curve. That and stacking powder was a completely different ball game, but now I've kind of grown to love that more than actually working with wet man-made snow, which is weird because I don't ever get to work with it.
I thought it was a really interesting question because, one of the things that, Ruben and I have talked about in the past, Kristin, is the changing snow types. And I mean, he even mentions it on his episode too, what that looks like and how it is to experience that and how it can be either a mental game changer, physical game changer. You're literally figuring out things as you go. I know some folks have kind of said, well, I don't even really know what I'm going to do until I get out there on the snow. Do you feel that that's kind of the same? Because as far as a machine on the East Coast, I don't think I've pushed snow on the East Coast. I know that I've pushed snow at places that resemble a similar snow type, but not specifically the East Coast. I mean, I know Corey, several different people, and I have kind of just tried to unpack this, but I really wanted your take because, I mean, I've seen the product at Blue. It's incredible. And you really, with your team, make magic happen. So is there a game plan walking into the situation compared to kind of what we were dealing with at June when we worked together there?
I believe there probably is more of a process. And also our time restraints are a lot different. Whereas if, like, say you're stacking a large photo shoot, jump landing or something out west, that might be days of pushing. If I went to my boss on the East Coast and said, I need days to build one jump, I would be laughed at. I was told to get out of the office. So it's a very different ball game, but I mean, it's unique in the sense of, yes, you can kind of work it a lot quicker. You're basically making it where you need it. So that's a plus. You're not farming it from half a mile away. But at the same time, there's highs and lows. I mean, I wish I could work with the best snow ever, but it just doesn't work.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic of conversation. That's why I'm always interested to hear the differentiating opinions on how that has unfolded in people's careers. Some people have valued it and they've gone, oh, wow, this has been great. And they take it back and they apply it. Other people have said, get me the fuck out of there. I don't want anything to do with that snow type anymore. And they go back to their home mountain and they're content in the bubble. Do you feel like that was kind of, I guess the question really would be, was there a goal? Was there an objective? I'll go ahead and maybe preface that question with this. I'll back up even more. I got the opportunity to work with you at June, and the best way I could describe you were consistent, you were on time, and you were never freaking out. I don't know how you pulled that off, but I'm kind of the same way when it comes to later on in my life. Fast forward, it's like if I say I'm going to be somewhere at 6, I'm there at like 5:30, and people are going, "What the hell are you doing here at 5:30?" And that's, I don't know if that's always how you've been, but it seemed to me like you really had an agenda, but in a good way, of taking away some positive lessons that you can learn and then take back to the East Coast. But I don't know. I mean, I could be completely wrong. I know that you moved on from June, but what do you think there?
I think there's always a bit of a plan. I'm always kind of 3 steps ahead of myself, which probably explains why I'm always on time and always working this way or that way, because I'm thinking way too far in advance, but it's helped me. It's been a benefit in my career. That's for sure. But yeah, that's probably where I'm at with it. It's a little bit of OCD and a whole lot of pre-planning. And yeah, I gotta be honest, like when I first showed up at June, one, I was stressed out because I was like, well, I gotta get it across that I belong here. So that was a struggle.
Yeah.
But like working with a completely new snow type that was 100% natural for the most part, I definitely needed to get my act together at one point. Like the first couple of days were a real struggle. And I remember going home and just like standing in the mirror, be like, you can do this. I know you can do this, but you need to get your shit together.
Yeah. Do you remember one of the best photos I think you and I have, or that you took of me, was beside the cutout of the jump that you built at the top of the park. And like, again, like that was one of the first times that I ever rode with somebody who built a feature, and the sheer stoke that I had on my face in that photo and that you had of what you had just done, I think the both of us felt like we had just conquered the world or something. You know what I mean? Like, it was definitely this thing is amazing and I just want to go and snowboard it right now. Like, it wasn't like this crazy poppy takeoff. It was just this really fun looking jump. Like, I was down. I was pumped. But maybe I'll let you.
Excited.
Yeah, like we both were. I had your back. But what we couldn't see was the dirt in the takeoff, and I don't know why, but we just, it's kind of like your ignorance is your bliss there for that happy moment that we were experiencing. I don't know if you saw it that way or not, but either a learning lesson or just kind of like an explosion of happiness that maybe, I don't know how to term it. Did you ever experience another moment like that? There you go. That was a learning lesson.
That moment was a huge one. I will never forget the feeling of seeing it in daylight. Definitely when you build a perfect jump and then realize there's dirt completely through it. That was a really big buzzkill. It was from extreme high to extreme low because it was pretty much the first large item I've built in California.
Yeah.
And, come in the next day and nobody is really hyped on it. So there it was, know your surroundings. I was trying to build a jump in a spot that I've never built a jump before. Not really understanding what the terrain underneath looked like, not understanding the depth of the snow. And a lot of that is like that pre-planning. Like, for me, if I had the perfect scenario, I would have been hiking up there before there was ever snow, just looking at the terrain and then going from there. But excitement got me. I think excitement was evident that night. And that's a lesson I definitely learned, is slow down sometimes. Just slow down, not necessarily in the machine, but your whole thought process and how you get it done needs to just take a step back. Sometimes walk away and come back with a clear head and just look at it and go like, wow, okay, I just about made that mistake. And had we done that, maybe the approach would have been different. Maybe the end result would have been different. But that was definitely a rough one.
I probably wasn't helping too much. Just like, okay, like make it a little poppier, a little take us some out. I was definitely an instigator there in the whole scenario. But just like you said too, for those people that are listening right now, it's a common theme that we discuss, and it's no different to when you're working on a vehicle or diagnosing a problem. Maybe it's an engine, whatever it is. Hell, I used it the other day when our kiddo lost her favorite toy, and she was freaking out about where we could find it and where it would be. And I said, hey, let's walk away. Let's just walk away for a second, figure out what happens if we just walk away. And sure enough, it's like, oh, Dad, I found it. That's I feel like that's so hard to convey. And the way that you just put that with the process that you've utilized for building jumps is, in a perfect world, you'd have a pre-planning scenario where you could hike it out, look at the dirt work, etc. But a lot of the times you don't have that as an operator. And so I feel like so often, more times than not in this industry, what we have is pressure. We have this pressure that is that, you got to go out there and perform if you got X number of seasons under your belt in the machine. And that's reasonable, but that pressure also makes it not okay to ask questions. Like, for example, hey, I don't know the layout of this. Where's the snow, and where can I get it to push this feature? Because I don't know where the dirt is. You said, just like trying to prove yourself. I wouldn't have done that. I'd have just fucking gone for it too. I'd have sent it. I'd have been like, here you go. Look at this.
Probably why we get along so well.
It's probably. But it was it was a very eye-opening experience for me too, because you took that one on the chin, and it wasn't, correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't like a couple days later that you were just, firing on all cylinders again and attempting new things, and you still got to build other stuff at June, which was sick.
Sure.
Yeah, and
you gotta be accountable. Like that's 100% of it. Like, you don't have to be the best operator in the world, but you have to own your mistakes. And if you do that, it'll take you way further than just being like a badass and going, my shit doesn't stink, because all of our shit stinks at some point.
Yeah, I know mine does. I had a coffee before the show, and I have another one right now. There's something to be said for that. We've talked about that a lot on the podcast, and I want to continue to hammer those points home because, it's being held accountable. It's being vulnerable. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing. I got to ask, was June and Mammoth, was that kind of always the dream, and being from the East Coast and seeing things that were built on the West Coast and produced, was that the goal to always get there and operate a machine eventually?
Strangely enough, yeah. Mammoth. Wow. I mean, I'd be lying if I said June was like the target. I mean, I was well versed in June from videos and everything else, but for some reason, I was always kind of centered on Mammoth. When I would vacation long before I lived there, like, that's where I'd go. Yeah. So it was kind of interesting when the opportunity came up to go there in that position. It was kind of like, I'm living in Mammoth, so that's sort of the dream. And then I got to see June. And June, as you know, is just a very unique old school place. And I fell in love with it. And any day that I wanted to go riding or skiing for me was like, I'm going to June 1st, not because work was there, but because it's what I grew up with, in a sense, like the little small ski area vibe. Like, you don't get that at Mammoth. And I love Mammoth too, but yeah, it's funny how the goal is switched from, Mammoth is this, Mammoth's that, to like, June's pretty awesome.
Well, yeah, I gotta call myself. There were days that I would go and ride Mammoth, and you would tell me, you were like, "Hey, you're fucking up here. You're like, you don't need to go and you need to come and ride June because there's gonna be nobody there." And I wouldn't listen. I would just go ride park at Mammoth. And June was a special place, and that's why I say it's interesting. Like, all these people that have worked at June throughout its existence, the park program there, and even the people that weren't a part of the park program, just the people that work there currently and then have worked there. It's a pretty special place. There's just, I know there are other places out there, like you were just talking about, that are relatively similar, where there's a vibe that exists that may be similar. But, historically, I think that's where I'm trying to gravitate towards with my question. And knowing kind of where you came from, being at the East Coast and Pennsylvania, just from you and I talking, were machines always a part of your life early on, or were they something that you later gravitated towards?
It was something that I always was interested in. Yeah. Maybe not having the opportunity to operate or having anything more than maybe, a rental small backhoe or something at some point to try to do something, and probably breaking something at my parents' house. But no, machines weren't really a part of my career or life until about 22, probably like 22 years old. So at an early age, I would say, instead of a machine, the one thing that I was introduced to that helped me long-term was a welder and metal fabricating. So like around 11, I was taught how to weld. So that I was working with my father. He wanted to build a trailer. Long story short, backyard project, but it led to an interest in metal fabrication. And long term, it's been great because it just seems like second nature to me in that regard.
Yeah, that's really cool. I didn't even get hooked onto the welding thing until, gosh, that would have been after already being in the park world. That would have been like 23 or 24, something like that. I learned how to weld on this in somebody's garage in Bristol, Tennessee, like stick welder, 7018 sticks. Learning how to run that shit on plate metal. Right, yeah. I was like, I gotta learn how to weld. And,
well, you learned right at least.
Well, I think that it's important. Yeah, I mean, do you agree? Do you think it's probably easier to start out on the MIG, but more beneficial for you to learn on a stick welder first?
I think stick, or, I mean, for me, I did go to school for it eventually. So, and I did have a job for a bit where I was doing a lot of TIG work. But that being said, I think MIG is obviously the go-to, get it done quick, it's still done right. It's just, you need to learn the ideas of metal fabrication and welding. And I think stick teaches you that. And MIG kind of like is very quick. Let's get in, make somebody very good at it and make it happen quickly and easy. I do think stick helps you learn what you're actually doing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you were going to steer somebody as far as advice, what would you tell them? Go to welding school or buy a cheapo welder and learn yourself?
Oh boy. I mean, it really depends on what you're trying to get into. For the park stuff, maybe buy a cheapo welder or tag along with somebody.
Yeah.
Because I mean, at the end of the day, like we're not like X-ray testing stuff. We're not
Yeah.
doing crazy stuff. So like, you know, maybe a lot of people would disagree with me in that, but I think you can learn a lot just from an experienced friend or an experienced somebody that is a tradesman that, you know, is your buddy and is willing to take you under their wing. It might be a lot more beneficial than spending thousands of dollars towards a certificate that in the ski business, only so many places are gonna actually like care. Honestly, they're like, can you weld? Cool. All right, you're in.
I feel like that's a really good point. I think that you could probably go get your certification and make yourself more attractive on like a job application if you had your certification. But I agree with you. The basic interest of what it is to weld, I think buy the cheapo welder or go get around somebody that knows how to do it and expose yourself to it. So that way
I think 90% of any like trade is just getting yourself in that scenario. You know, I went to school for structural auto body as well. And that was more of like a college that was after high school. And truthfully, I learned a lot there because I didn't do it in high school. I didn't go to VOTech or anything like that. But learning it there was great book-wise. When I actually went out and did that profession for a short term before I ended up in the park world like full time, I was still lost.
Yeah.
You know, I was still coming in as a newbie that I'm there like, oh my God, I got in over my head.
Yeah. Would you ever use that as a fallback? Would you ever, if just, you know, not pursue the industry anymore, would you go pursue welding as a job?
I would say metal fabrication specifically, or like probably excavation would, if I wasn't going in the ski business. Just because the auto body was not my cup of tea. So just working on cars, it's fun in your backyard, but it's not fun as a profession. Not for me, at least.
This is an interesting, you may not like this perspective, but some of the stuff that I've gotten into in my life that I have been passionate about, I have attempted to, you know, make money from that love that I have of that thing. So like photography or snowboarding or terrain parks or whatever it is. And because I've done that, what I've done in some cases is that I have removed that core feeling that I'm so infatuated with, passionate about, and it ruins my whole mindset of why I got into it in the first place. And then I fall out of love with the passion or the idea. I don't know if that's something that you've ever had happen with either the metal fabrication, the snowcat, the excavation, the industry as a whole. And I'm asking because you really are dabbling in so much stuff right now. You're a mountain biker, you're a skier, you're an excavator operator, you're a snowcat operator, you're a welder. I mean, you've been all over. So you have all these different extremities that you've taken a hold of and made amazing through what you've been able to retain for info and then apply it to what you got in front of you. But has that ever happened to you? Have you ever kind of fallen out of love with the idea of the things that you're good at?
150%. So I've skied since I was 5 years old, and there is competition skiing, there is racing, there is the fact that it was my job as a park crew manager, even just running a rake, whatever it was. It didn't matter if it was freezing rain or beautiful snow. I was out there, and that burnt me out a bit. And part of that I did myself. Like some of that was just extreme passion and kind of like I just dive into things. Like I definitely have stuff that swirls in my head. So like for me, if I can stay busy and dive into my interests, I'm great. And this was after like we kind of lost contact for a couple of years, but like I got really burnt out on skiing. And I had to take a step back. It was when I was getting back into a machine full time again. And I decided that year that I'm only going to ski the days that I want to ski. And that year, it looked like 3 days. which is wild because I'm
That
used
is
to
so wild.
100+ days. But you know
Yeah.
what? The next year was 10, and the next year was like 25, and it just kept growing again because I took a step back and I looked at it from the perspective of I'm doing this for me. So if I don't want to go out and ski, why go ski? So, it was a very weird thing to do. Because it's something that's been ingrained in my life my whole life, every day of my life since I was 5. So that being said, to take a step back was difficult, but sometimes you need the reset. And I think that's, I think that's huge. Even if it's industry, like I know some people get burnt out on the business and then 5 years later they come back. Like I have seen that happen. It's a little rare, but like it does happen.
That's a hell of an answer, and I'll maybe run with me on this for a second. That process that you just kind of described was something that I had thought about doing with our kiddo. It's like, hey, I'm introducing our 6-year-old to snowboarding, but I don't want to do it the way that I was, or I don't want to do it differently from the way that I was introduced to it. It was very much, it wasn't forced on me. It was very organic. It wasn't like, hey, let's get your ass up there and go down the hill. It was whenever. And
yeah,
a lot of people get into this game because they want access to the slopes or a ticket or a pass. And when you've maybe had access to stuff like that for so long, maybe it becomes stagnant and the same. And so for me recently, like, it's so refreshing to hear you speak like that, because I myself am trying to step back and go, well, how can I push the reset button on why I want to go up there every day? And recently, this past year with COVID, and then the season before that, was, what can I go and ride outside of the terrain park? What can I go work on just turning and transitioning from my heel edge to toe edge? What kind of board control can I work on? And then just recently, this last year, it was, well, if our kiddo doesn't want to go snowboarding and she just wants to make snowmen on the hill, let's do that too. So it was kind of trying to look at it from, and like you were saying, it's how many days am I going to go ride this year, and how many days am I going to go ride next year or ski next year? I was trying to look at it from what can we do differently, instead of going up there, parking, strapping in, going down the hill, eating lunch, and then going home, or whatever it is, and just busting up the rhythm and starting something that's new. I don't know if that makes sense or not. That was my attempt.
That makes total sense to me, because back when I did ski 100 days a year, or whatever the number was, probably every 20 days I'd throw a snowboard on.
Yeah.
And like, I'm not a great snowboarder. I have fun on it, but it's not my go-to thing. But like, just sometimes mixing it up and throwing a wrench in the spokes helps. Like, it's like, okay, well, let's break the routine. Let's end the cycle and, hop on something else. You can still do your job, but it's definitely a different, way to spend your day.
Yeah. I was taken back by that answer you had, because I had not really thought about our process until you started unpacking it there, because I'm thinking the same thing right now with, what does next season look like? What does this upcoming season look like? How do I maintain something that's intriguing enough for me to want to go up there all the time and find that magic that I love talking about every time we go up there? I do have another special guest question. I know we've already talked a bunch, but I've got another special guest question for you. This episode is going to be loaded with special guest questions, and that has a lot to do with sometimes who I'm talking to, just for everybody that's listening. I know some people were saying, oh my gosh, sometimes episodes have a bunch and sometimes they don't, but there are a lot of people that really, really, really are excited to have been around Kristin in the past and in the present, and so for them to weigh in is sick. I think it's amazing, just a testament to who you are. So without further ado, I've got Caleb Hamilton lined up for you. So
awesome.
Here we go.
Hey, Parker and Kristin, and all you blade divers, thanks for having me again. My question for you, Kristin, is, after working at bigger resorts like June Mountain, what made you want to make the transition back to the smaller mom and pop resorts? And how did those experiences at the bigger resorts help you progress the programs at Blue Mountain?
Well, Coming back to Pennsylvania from California was like one of the best things I've ever done, and also one of the like most a little bit lack of reward at the beginning because I definitely went through I miss California vibe. I miss the waking up every day and looking at the mountains and being in the mountains, and it's a different thing. But I needed to be back to what I was familiar with. I took away what I needed from the experience, and I mean I'd love to do it again. But I knew there was a piece of me that when the opportunity at Blue came up that I knew it was going to pay off in the end, which is a weird thing to say about a job because when I first started there, I was still questioning everything there. I was like, is this the right choice? Do I really want to do this? And that was part of the burnout too. I'm not going to lie. Like, going from perfect snow to back to what I was ice and slamming myself on ice over and over again definitely played a part. But that being said, it was looking at my future and looking what I knew I needed to achieve in that future. I couldn't picture it in California. I couldn't picture, to be honest, financial stability. I couldn't picture my own mental stability in California. So that's a little hard to admit. But the truth is, being back home, even though it wasn't exactly home, it wasn't where I grew up. It's still further north than where I grew up. It was right at the time, and it was the right choice for me. I think everybody has their own, course to run. Like some people, they may go out west and never come back. They may go, I'm not looking back. And it was weird for me to like go home and see that and go, I want to be back. But truth is, sometimes that's the path we all have to take.
I feel like you're going to have lots of deep quotes throughout this entire episode, and I'm going to, I forgot to grab I have it now, and I'm going to write that one down. That was really good. Well, and I say that because I can relate to a piece of that. I myself definitely grew up in Tennessee, and so it was very interesting for me to kind of be looked at as the oddball because I was not taking the traditional route for a job. I was very much interested in what it was to be involved in something that I'm passionate about instead of something that's going to pay the bills. And I think when we start pursuing things like that, I think there are always going to be haters. There are always going to be people that question you. And you may or may not have experienced that, but it sounds like what you had out there was really the ability to kind of go through some shit, like kind of figure out what you wanted to do, who you were, what you were all about, and realize that the best way that you could help yourself was to be back on the East Coast. Is that a correct assumption or an inaccurate statement?
Absolutely. I think a huge part of, and I know I talked to you about this before, is when I was in California, I was struggling. Like I was not in a great headspace. And on top of it, I'm trying to perform at the highest level I've ever tried to perform at. So, sometimes, I was lost in my own head and I let that get the better of me out there. I think taking a step back was actually a good thing because I think that pressure and not really dealing with like what was struggling would have been very bad for me in the end, like very, very bad. It was a very weird game to play, that's for sure.
Yeah. Do you feel like that there could have been like maybe it was me or maybe it was just support from somebody else that you could have had in that path that you chose to go back towards the East Coast would never have happened if you would have stayed out there, if you'd have had something maybe that was different for support or because that was really, the era of what it was to build Park back then that was what, 08, 09? And so like that season, you're still kind of like, I like to call it the era of the rider where like the industry was shelling out cash and you had massive sponsorship deals and, Nike snowboarding existed and you had all these things that were there that really kind of put Parks on this massive stage. And so if you'd have had kind of a different support system there, do you think you'd have stayed?
I think so.
Yeah.
I and part of that's on me too. Like,
Mm,
part of me was, I'm here to do a job. I have to look cool. I have to. I mean, honestly, that's how it felt some days living in
yeah.
Mammoth. Was you had to look the image. You had to look the part. And whether that was in my own head or if that was the reality, I don't know. To this day, I couldn't tell you. But I do think if I was more comfortable with myself out there, then I probably would have considered sticking around, or maybe Lake Tahoe area, or even anywhere for that instance. But home felt somewhat familiar.
Yeah.
You know, I think I had it. Like, our friendship when we were in California was great, but there wasn't a complete openness. There wasn't, and part of that's like to this day we're friends. That's great. You're one of the couple friends that I still have from there that are very, very close to me. Um, but then the rest of the friends that you make, I always call them like friends of necessity.
Mm,
You're in a strange land. You're in a basically, in a sense.
yeah.
And like, you don't want to be alone in it. So you're trying to befriend everybody. And it's weird, you go through cycles. You almost befriend anybody at first, and then you realize the real people and you stick with those people. And I think that's a real hard struggle at the same time trying to accomplish something that I think our job is more than just a clock in, clock out position. It's a job where there has to be passion involved. There has to be um, desire and imagination and creativeness. And if that's not all clicking, it's a struggle. And to think about meeting like your people on the other side of the country is a very difficult thing on top of all of that. Um,
Yeah, and those are some deep thoughts right there because I agree with you. I think that oftentimes we as operators, um, I think some of us are, I would say most of us actually are deeper thinkers than we really want to admit. And for me, I've got to be able to vibe with a team and with a crew if I'm going to spend time with them off the clock. Does that make? I think that's how I would put it. Like,
for sure.
and maybe a different way I could put it would be being able to differentiate between what's a distraction and what's worth my time. And
Yeah.
and so like early on, I was really bad at differentiating between what was worth my time. And I would say that it would be interesting, like you're saying, to if you had a different support system or if you were more comfortable with yourself being out there in that situation, what it would be now, what 2021 would look like. I know it's never really good to look in the rearview mirror because you get a crick in your neck doing that. I don't like looking back, but I like kind of. Are you a reader? I was going to ask you that. Are you a reader? Are you like a big time reader?
Not really. I mean, maybe on the internet,
Yeah.
but I have a lot of books that are started.
Yeah. I think we're all big readers on the internet for sure.
Yeah, I wish I could say I was, but
Yeah.
I'm not.
No, I was just curious because you've got this sense of confidence about you that you just ooze. You definitely ooze confidence. You project the fact that you know who you are, you know your limits, you know what you want to participate in, and anything beyond that is, well, you're going to dictate whether it's something you're going to participate in or not. Is that true? I mean,
Right.
that's the image that you give me nowadays.
Well, I hope. So the way I always say, there's a very fine line between like confidence and cockiness, and
Mm,
like, I never wanted to become across as cocky in profession, sports, anything. I just never wanted to be that person, but I always wanted to be confident in the approaches I took. And 90% of that's just believing the direction you're taking is the proper one. Yeah, you have to go out and you have to take some risks along the way. But um, if you approach something going, I might get through this okay, or this jump might come out awesome, what are the odds that it's actually going to come out awesome?
mm,
If you say, for instance, say you're hiking along a cliff, are you going to go, I might fall off this cliff, or I'm going to make it to the other side, I'm going to have a blast doing it? That's kind of the approach I take with life. Like, if, you know, that I can sit there and worry about everything under the sun, but when it comes time to do it, you kind of just got to do it.
mm-hmm.
And if that answers the question.
Yeah. Do you, and maybe I'll back up to what Caleb was talking about too. Do you, what were you kind of able to take back? I know you've kind of talked about it a little bit, but you going out to the West Coast, we talked about the goal and what the vision was, and you being stoked on being at Mammoth. But what was something that you really took back that you were able to apply to where you are now at Blue that was beneficial to the team or to yourself?
I think one, that it was absolutely valid. This is still the earlier days of parks where you had to really, really beg a general manager or any mountain manager to give you snow or whatever you needed to accomplish a job. They just didn't see it as a valid thing. It was what the kids do. And then, well, I got news for you: the kids are paying the bills. But so that was a big part of taking it back. But quality over quantity. There are some great park programs in, I guess you would call it Mid-Atlantic or this region. I was just the East Coast in general. So there's also a lot of parks in a very, or mountains for that instance, in a very small area with a high population. So it does matter what you put out. Your numbers do get affected by everything. And putting out 101 features is great in a trail map or a trail guide, but if you put out 60 or 50 high quality ones, I think that goes way further than just slamming every park feature that you have in the boneyard into the park. Somehow half of them ride okay, half of them are buried or whatever. I really stress that because feature count was always big where I went to, and though I want the numbers to be up, I also don't want it to be a headache to groom. I want to be able to maintain that every single day properly instead of, well, you need to rake around this area because we can't access it. Well, then you build it wrong, in my opinion, because of how heavy our parks are ridden. There's spots that I would never be able to take a whole night just maintaining all these things if I built it, if I locked myself in. And there's a lot of stuff that, Ruben, going back to he gave me different perspectives on how a park should be built. I believe it was Sunrise was the big park.
Yeah, at the top, from the top down, upper and lower Sunrise.
Now that trail is stacked by West Coast standards. By East Coast, that was pretty spread out. There was a ton. I mean, that's like 1.5 miles of park, and I would have to say it was all high quality, but we weren't cramming things in to cram it in. And I really do think on the East Coast, we tend to do that. So that was a really big push coming back, was just build things right. Take the time to build them right. It's been a battle. I've been at Blue for 11 years and it's still a battle to this day. When the timeline crunch hits, it's a holiday weekend, that park's going to be open. But sometimes you have to sit there and compromise too and be like, here's what I can do and here's what I can safely do. And that's a part that people forget. We're doing something that people throw themselves off the ground on or slide across metal objects on, and if you do it wrong, you're gonna have people hurt, and you don't want that.
Yeah, wow, that was a hell of an answer. Yeah, because then you're dealing with either a PR nightmare, and I mean, people are going to get hurt. It's a dangerous sport. That's the whole thing. I thought Kyle did a pretty good job of unpacking what it was like to be able to attack progression, but also at the same time help people realize what they're getting into. And just because they think that they can do a 1-foot jump doesn't necessarily mean that they can the same day or within the same hour go and do a 50-foot jump if they've never snowboarded before. So I thought that was a really cool perspective he threw out there. And I agree. Less is more. I love that point. Quantity over quality. Being able to produce something that's safe, that has a message for the guest, that aligns with everything that you are as a resort too. It's kind of like I remember at one point in time there was the Transworld and the resort reports, and the park report things that they would have, and they would have X resort has X many features, and those features are these, and these types of features. It was all segmented. It was really good. It was proportioned out and labeled out. But then you take, Joe Schmo, smaller resort, and they look at that in the magazine and they go, why can't we do that? When I think what you're saying really is, well, you don't need to. And you probably you never should really focus on being them. You should be you. And you should be your program. And figure out how you can kind of cater to your customer based on what you can provide that's safe and fun. Yeah, that's a deep thought. I like that.
There are mountains that, that's their market, is just park. I don't think they're probably the most profitable mountains, and it might not be the goal of that mountain to be. It might be a marketing thing. It might be whatever, and that's cool. But people sometimes get locked into seeing what a mountain like that can put out and go, well, why can't everybody do this? Truth is, financially, it's almost irresponsible.
Yeah.
The resources it takes to put out high quality features and the terrain it takes. Like for us, our crowd is a large percentage park, but ultimately it's family. So at the end of the day, you have to sit there and go, the family needs a place to go. The ripper that doesn't want to hit a jump needs a place to go. The mogul skier wants moguls to ski. So there has to be a compromise and a home for everybody. And as much as I'd love a mountain full of terrain park features, I'd probably be bored skiing it myself.
I probably would too. And that's why I like this past season. We really tried to attack it from what kind of trail can we go and ride? Is it a green trail? Is it a blue trail? Primarily it was the bunny hill. But what portion of the bunny hill can we go and ride? What type of snowman can we build? Because the scene, I think, can change daily for the participant that has access to the ski resort. Maybe that's the best way I could frame it. For the consistent park goer that wants to be up there, yeah, they're okay with things not changing for maybe a week or so, but then things get stale. But yeah, I thought that was a really good point you had there. Being able to make sure that everybody fits into what they'd like to participate in. I continue to hammer home the word access. I think that's the most important, because without snowmaking, grooming, snow removal, parks. We're just basically going to be figuring out how to go uphill and downhill on our own once we're there in the parking lot, wondering how we're going to do that.
Pretty much. If you found a parking spot first.
Such a good point, too. We've had some East Coast people on the show before, and we've had a bunch of West Coast people. All of which have voiced their opinion and on which one is maybe better, but I don't necessarily think that one is better than the other. I think they each come with their challenges. But I'd be curious to know, based on you working at Blue, being invested in the industry for as long as you have, is the West Coast the best coast? There's a lot of ski and snowboard history there on the East Coast. I think people often tend to forget that. Half-pipe construction, giant slalom racing, World Cup races, all that stuff has taken place there. Probably the invention of tubing. I don't know. I could be wrong there on that one, but is that because I think there's something to be said for working for a place like Blue. It's privately owned, changed hands over time, but it feels like a very homey vibe there. And I feel like you have support. But what is that like? East Coast, West Coast? Is the West Coast the best coast?
All right. So no matter how I answer this, there's going to be people that like me and hate me all at the same time. So I would say East Coast is definitely more. Yeah, East Coast is better than West Coast. And a piece of myself is even smacking myself for saying that, because I love the snow and I love the skiing and terrain out West. But there's something more honest and driven about East Coast people and skiers and machine operators and everything else. It's, you earn your, I'm not saying there's not bad weather on the West Coast, because there definitely is at times. Heck, being sucked in by storms, that in itself can actually suck. But like, I was shocked when I moved out West how fair weather park skiers and snowboarders were. Like, there was wind days. There was this day, oh, the sun's not right, the light's flat. And I'm used to slamming on ice over and over again and hitting wind as you're taking a takeoff. And that was just part of your daily routine. Skiing in rain, skiing in this, that, and the other thing. So it's very interesting to see the difference in that regard. And I think there's a lot of heritage. There's a lot of just like that diehard drive from the East Coast that not saying the West Coast doesn't have, but where it does have it, it might actually be filtering in from the rougher environments. I love the West Coast, but to me, the East Coast is always going to be where it's at.
Yeah, I think that's a fair answer. I definitely do. I mean, there's no wrong answer. I would say that the grind is real in both places if I was to weigh in on the question. But I also think there is more kind of a spotlight put on the West Coast stuff. And just talking to some of the East Coast folks that have come on the show, are happy to and are stoked to have some of that spotlight put on the East Coast, because it definitely is an animal. It's definitely an animal to be able to produce a product for people to pay for and then come and experience. But I will say this though. Have you been to? And this is probably like way far away, but have you been to the indoor facility in New Jersey with big snow?
I have not yet. I have friends that work there and everything else and go there frequently, and they love it. I have yet to do that. I think that's where that interest part, going back to the earlier conversation, is going like, well, I don't know if I want to drive there to go skiing in July. I'll be real with you. But I think it's pretty awesome what's going on. I just know my own interest. I'd rather be on a bike in July. And in winter, I'd rather be out on a hill. So like for me, that's not the best option. But for a lot of people, like say like me at 14 years old, I would have been there all the time. Like that was my interest then. As an adult, not so much. But I think that's great too. And there's struggles there that I've picked the brain of some people that know a little bit of how it's going there, and it's a totally different ballgame than either of us have seen. It's definitely a unique scenario that we can't understand either. So it's pretty cool. It really is.
Do you know what? If I was to, I agree. I think that it would be hard for me to go there on the daily, but you know what? If I was to be there and they were choosing to make snow every day, I would still, if I was there every day and they were making snow every day, fresh snow in the middle of July, indoors, I would definitely go out and just stand there underneath the fan gun while they were making it and just smile. I mean, that to me is the shit. I loved making snow at June Mountain. That was the jam. That was so much fun. That was so much fun. I will never forget those moments.
I always crack up when I tell our snowmakers what the actual snowmaking system was at June. It's like, I mean, the amount of power that we put out is pretty insane. And they're talking about, oh, if we lose this pump or this compressor, and I'm like, if you only knew what the struggle really was.
Yeah, the white ribbon of death. I remember Jeremy Cooper being like, yeah, so we lost the oh man, power source down low, so we lost the was it the compressor? We lost the compressor down low, so we're gonna bring in the golf course compressor and roll it in on the trailer and fire that thing up. And I'm like, oh my god, what is this gonna look like? And I remember that thing rolling in and just being like, wow, what?
I mean,
yeah, sorry, go ahead.
How many miles apart was the compressor and the pump? Like, I mean, like just running back and forth alone, you'd burn a tank of fuel in a snowmobile.
Yeah. Well, what about the time, like just like going up and down in the mule, on the dirt road, and then that was a trip.
That was.
Using the old snowmaking gun just hooked up to a water line to cool down the pond. Just so many, but the one thing I'll never forget, I think I've already mentioned this too in a different episode, is like the stargazing and the and the constellation research with Tor Ryan, man.
Yes.
Like he would sit there and literally, because we didn't have like fancy phones back then, so you come down to the office and then go into the computer and be like, okay, like here's where this constellation should be, and here's where this one is, and here's where that, and we go out there and be like, yeah, that's Cassiopeia. Yeah, that's Cassiopeia. And that's funny.
I miss that, dude. I'll tell you what, I got to experience, I think it was what you would call thunder snow.
Ooh,
where it
cool.
was like, there was like a weird freak lightning storm the one night, and it wasn't snowing heavy enough that like it was blocking out like the other mountains from above, like up off Sunrise.
What?
So like as I'm running the cat, which one, I look back and I'm like, probably shouldn't have been up there, but you know how June was.
Send
like,
it. Yeah.
As you'd get like a flash in the sky, it would light up the mountains. And like, that was one of the wildest things I've ever seen in my life.
Wow. Yeah, I would have been
was
like, I'm
definitely-
parking this thing. I'm out. And you were, God, wow. Yeah. No, Ruben even said, he was like, such shitty cats, man. Like, such shitty snow cats.
I think 16 breakdowns in a season at one point for BR2. I think it was.
Yeah. I remember there was one night you were like, yeah, it's working, but you got to kind of like jiggle the switch. And then, then we made it work with duct tape and Band-Aids.
But
Hmm?
that was the fun of June. That was absolutely the fun of June Mountain, was that like you didn't know what your night was going to necessarily, like I didn't have a brand new Park Pro or Bison or anything like that. I was coming in going like, well, I hope the cat runs. And if the cat doesn't run, can we fix it? And let's go from there.
Yeah, and I'm sure there probably are some places that still function in that way. And maybe that same type of magic still exists, but I think that every single night when we came in, I remember being with Dom Edwards, and it was like, well, this machine's not running. You can ride along with each other. It's like, okay, cool.
Like it's a paycheck, I guess.
Yeah, sweet. As much as you're willing to get into, unwrap, paint the picture for us, but what was it like growing up as Kristin Lenart?
Well, growing up as Kristin Lenart was an obsessed kid who loved skiing, biking, X Games. That was fairly new at the time. I think it was like the first one that was in Rhode Island, if I'm dating myself correctly. I don't know.
Well, because how old are you? What year were you born in?
84.
Yeah, I was born in 84 too. So you're 30. You're 37.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
And adventure, just anything to get hyped on. That was kind of my thing. Like, especially, and I mean, we were in that Mountain Dew era of like, let's get crazy and do anything possible. And I think I kind of took that to an extreme point. And there's the part of the story that we dance around sometimes, but the truth is, I was a different person when I was a kid. My name wasn't Kristin. My name, which I will leave out, was something else. And I struggled with a lot of depression and mental health issues as a kid. I felt very alone through it. But sports and physical, anything physical, like sports, hobbies, diving into aviation, any interest that I could possibly have, helped me kind of get away from a lot of my issues, but it also put me further in a hole. And that was my childhood. Yeah.
Yeah, I think maybe I shouldn't frame it like that. I'll say this. As a parent now, I think there are so many instances where it's kind of like the cheat code to life. Like, really, there is no cheat code to life. You got to kind of walk through whatever you got, but go from level 1 to the boss level. But as a parent now, I'm looking at it going, how can I help our kid not have to deal with any of the bullshit that I had to deal with? And I don't know what those answers are some days, because I'm trying to preach like the basics, but I'm also trying to preach because one of the things I didn't do as a kid was I wasn't open and honest with my parents. Like I was just not that way. My dad would truck me around to car shows because that's what he wanted to fucking do, and that's cool. Like that was his way of trying to open up the door for the relationship to be better, and there were things that I gravitated towards, like baseball. Baseball was my thing. And he was able to gravitate towards that. So was my mom. But now what I'm trying to do is be more of a, hey, well, what do you want to do? Because, I want to go paddleboard, but you may want to paint some art, or you may want to, I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, I'm trying to relate it to that so that you can unpack that a little bit more. But was there something that in your childhood that you felt like kind of along the same lines with the support at June and that West Coast vibe? Like if you had something that was able to kind of light that fuse differently for you, you would have been all right?
I think I would have. I think I'd be a totally different person.
Yeah.
That's the part that when I look back, and like you said earlier, it's a dangerous game of looking back. Because you can always play the what if card. You can go, well, if I did this then, if I did this that time, that's great, but you didn't. And you'll get wrapped up in something that you can't change. So part of me doesn't get too overthought in it, but I think if I had somebody to go, at least like an image to be like, okay, I can be different. I can be myself, and I can do all these things. It would probably be different. It was a different era. Um, times have changed a lot in that regard. So I didn't share what was really going on in my life. I didn't share my inner struggles. Um, they definitely came through in negative ways. Probably a little too lackadaisical and safety with a lot of things, and just kind of throwing caution to the wind with a lot of things in my life. And I'm thankful that it never backfired. I never hurt anybody. I never hurt myself. I never got arrested. I never, I look back, I did some crazy stuff. I did some really respectable stuff at the same time, but I was struggling, trying to find my home. And, it was right in front of me, but I didn't know how to do it. And there was no one there to show me how to do it. And it probably would be a very different world. And then, like I said, if I look back and go, would I even be building parks if I dealt with things I did then? Because I dove so heavily into skiing and competing and everything else that I was going, I'm not even going to wonder what happens when this ends. I'm just going to go for it. And, looking back, that was a very negative, it was a very difficult life to live because, at that time I wasn't Kristin, the good friend, or Kristin, this person or that person. I was Kristin. I build parks. I talk about building parks. I talk about skiing 24/7. And that's not a person. That's an entity. That's something that's like a robot doing all this stuff, and it backfired. I mean, the struggle that I said about June, I kind of was in a way running from my problems to go there, and only to get 3,000 miles from home and go, guess what? Your problems are still here, and you're gonna have to deal with them sooner or later. So if that's kind of how I see it.
Well, how do you? So maybe the follow up would be, how do you become comfortable in your own skin in an industry? And I'll be nice, but in an industry that is predominantly made up of a specific stereotype of an individual. Let's go there.
That's fair.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. And we've kind of discussed it on the podcast before, but being comfortable as yourself is quite powerful. I mean, you may disagree with that, but I think if you can be you and be comfortable with who you are, there is so much that is available to you for resources. You then become, I think, powerful with the questions that you're posing to people of power and of authority. I think that you become confident in being able to speak about things that are relevant. I think that you position yourself as somebody that can not only listen but respond appropriately to problems that do arise. I think you gain respect when you can be yourself. And I think that skill set is something that I don't even know if that can be taught. And I'm really curious to kind of figure out how you did it, because I think there would be so much value in other people realizing how they could maybe be comfortable in their skin too.
Well, I'm going to start it out with what not to do. Because I try to be authentic. I try to shoot from the hip a bit and just be like, this is how it is. And I think that ultimately in the end is going to come back around and be part of this. But, like I said, I was in a dark place. I was in a dark place even at Blue. And unfortunately, and I kind of danced around the whole thing by saying, oh, my name wasn't Kristin. I am transgender. I transitioned 10, 12, I don't even know, 10 years ago. So just so nobody is confused by what's going on. But that being said, I wasn't confident, and I wasn't authentic. I didn't know what any of that meant to me at the time because I was so wrapped up in an image that I was trying to create and now dismantle, and that was a struggle. I actually got to the point where it flew because I could only see the reality of this is my job. I'm a park manager. I build parks. I'm a welder. I do this, and I ski. And I had stuff printed up to sit down and have an actual meeting about transitioning. And um, the hard part of that is like the truth. I went in finally and had the conversation with the general manager going like, this is either going to go right or this is going to go tragically wrong. And it shouldn't have to be that way. You know, I don't think it is as much of that way today with a lot of people, but I wasn't in a good place that day. I walked into the office pretty much throwing all my cards on the table and hoping, really hoping that like things went right. And then I walked out confused going, well, that went differently. My general manager was like, oh yeah, okay, like we'll figure this out. Well, it'll be cool. And like he didn't know he was probably saving my life at that point, because I was really in a bad place. And I knew my life just took a very big hit because what the hell is happening? Like I didn't even understand it. Like I knew I needed to, but I was like, man, the future could be bad. But I'll tell you this much. It only went uphill from that day. Don't get to the point where it's a last ditch Hail Mary attempt of happiness or following whatever path you need to do. Be proactive, almost preventative, so you don't get to that stage. And you know, that, whether it's anything, I mean, it could just simply be, I want tattoos or I want this, and my work doesn't like it. It doesn't have to be this big thing. It could be just, you know, if you approach, like you said, authentically and come at them and you have the skills, I mean, not that that even should matter, but you have good work ethic, you show up on time, you always give your best effort. Why would an employer want to get rid of a good employee for being themselves? And I think at first it was a very bumpy road, especially in the area and demographic and everything else that I work in. I didn't like going to work at times, but like it got better over time. It got better, and I just tried to be myself and tried to treat people with respect the way I wanted to be respected. You know, were there occasions that were not so pleasant? Yes. Did I handle them kicking and screaming? Not the person. I mean, maybe after work, but like it was definitely it wasn't easy, but you just got to come into it and attack and be confident and be authentic. But it's, you know, if you do that, the rest comes around. You know, there was people that respected me leading up to my transition, and for years I could tell could not respect no matter how good my work was, because of who I was. And that's something that was a very big struggle. That was, you know, I know my worth, I know my value. I try to bring that every day. And when sometimes people are like, well, it's good for you, or it's good for a girl, or it's good for a trans person, or whatever their whole gripe is. If you keep killing them with quality and respect, and not, don't be a bitch, don't be an asshole to them, it comes around. You know, there's times I wanted to like just snap. There's days I came home and did snap on friends or whatever, and I apologize to them, but like all I could do is be professional and hope that eventually I would be treated in a professional manner. And I think for the most part, I was. I was shocked how supportive my workplace was. But at the same time, it wasn't 100%. I would never expect it to be 100%. I didn't expect it to be 10%. So being 70% was great. But it's just a work in progress, you know. And now I look at it today, it's just my life. This is who I am. I've become a better version of me, in my opinion, since going down that road. And I think most people that I've worked with would almost say the same thing. They're like, okay, well, I know my one friend that works at a resort was like, you were kind of miserable before, and now you're just happy in you, and I like to be around you. And I hate to hear that I was miserable before, but why dance around it? Just be you.
I think that message that you're putting out to the world is the right message. No matter what you're going through, no matter who's putting you through it, no matter where your head's at, and no matter what you've got to do to pick yourself back up, be professional. And I think that that's very difficult to do. I don't know how you I don't know if that was a learned thing or if that was what was that? Was that like a learned thing for you? Not to just jump right back into you. I'm relating that story because it's a part of my process and learning how to be a better advocate to the reality of what we're discussing on the podcast, but also a professional person within the snow industry. And I just don't know if that professionalism is taught or if it's a learned trait or if it's something that you're born with or what have you. Be interested to know what you think there.
Well, I think there's a couple of ways to frame that. Well, one, maybe not the most positive, but I was definitely raised in a family where like what happened in private stayed in private. And, not saying that's a good or a bad thing. I do believe that families need to keep some things private and not everything is public. And I talk a lot and I always talked as a kid. So I have nothing against my parents for being like, you keep what happens in here quiet, because I'll tell every stranger down the block. So I that was one way I was raised. I also believe, prior to competing as a downhill mountain bike racer, I did a lot of competition in freestyle skiing. Some at a higher level, some not at a higher level, but I did have sponsorships. And if there's one thing I've learned through sports is it's very easy to lose them. And image is everything. And it's not the image of what you see in a ski or a snowboard movie where they're drinking and partying. They've already made it. It's the image of, how do I get people pumped to go skiing or pumped to go biking, and then slide in the fact that, oh, this company has some pretty good stuff without saying it. And truthfully, some of that is probably from that experience. You can't, you can, don't get me wrong. There's definitely like the Sean Palmers of the world who are just like, F society, F what you think, I don't care. And I love Sean Palmer. I grew up idolizing Sean Palmer, but I also grew up idolizing someone like Dave Mira, who, if you look at Dave Mira, he was the epitome of professional. He handled everything, probably to a negative, but he handled everything very professionally. He didn't take the approach of drinking and partying and everything public. I think some of that, it's a totally different ballgame, but professionalism definitely breeds that from, or I should say sports and like sponsorships and everything else and image create that professionalism. As long as you, really look at it from the bigger picture.
Yeah, there's an interesting quote out there from Dana White in UFC, owner operator. He said that, hey, at an early age, like in my early 20s, I quit drinking. And I quit drinking because I wanted to be able to focus on what it was that I was going towards and what I wanted to achieve. And then once I achieved those things, I was okay with partaking in whatever I wanted to do. But to be able to block out whatever it was that was the kind of like the peer pressure to participate in because of his demographic that he was hanging out with or the people that, whatever it was, he chose to cut that out, like just sever it from his lifestyle so that he could pursue achieving the status that he is now. Like, don't get me wrong, like I don't necessarily condone that man in any hierarchy, or for that matter, have a poster of him on my wall. I just, as somebody who is as successful as he is, to admit that he cut that out of his lifestyle, and then upon achieving something that was a success that he has, he's like, yeah, okay, like I'll have a beer every once in a while or whatever it is. I mean, people have a different way of getting to that professionalism. I guess that's my point I'm trying to make with that quote. We have talked about a lot, and I want to talk about more. But before we get too far along, I want to jump into the push road questions of the day. So let's do that.
The push road question of the day.
Secretly my favorite part of the show. That's right, the push road question of the day. And we have kind of done the audible. We have been posting the push road question of the day announcement twice, and that has definitely been received well from the people that are participating in social media. So they've been grateful, because ultimately it's gone out once in the past and now it's going out twice. So we're doing day of and then day before. So folks, don't miss it. It's great. Kristin, are you ready for this?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Killer. So we've had a bunch of people contribute, but I've narrowed it down to two. We got our top two, and one is, we'll do one fun and one serious, is kind of how I dubbed it.
Sounds good.
And this one's really cool. I like this one. It's from Hannah Deans, and Hannah is from the wonderful country of New Zealand, so shout out to Hannah. Hannah says, "Hey there. What has been the most challenging aspect of being a woman operator?"
The most challenging aspect of being a woman operator would be just not being kind of, I guess, termed mansplained. I don't typically use that word, so it's kind of the only word I can think of to do it. But I've had people completely tell me how I should do things that didn't realize that I could actually do them without it being explained to. And I'm sure that's probably a very common question. And our answer. I'm really great at taking advice. I love input, but when it's coming from the perspective of somebody that knows better than me 100%, and that you should listen because I know better than you, that's a little aggressive and it comes across rough. Luckily it's not very often, but it does happen and can happen. That's probably the best way I could put it.
What would you say to all the mansplainers that you have run into in the past, if you could provide them with any constructive criticism?
Maybe keep your opinions to yourself.
Boom.
If there's if there's a real, there's a way to share experience and share advice, and telling somebody in less, like, basically without saying it, that you're better at something, so here's why you should do it, isn't the proper way to do it. Like, just do it in a proper way and it will go a lot further, and that person will probably be receptive and listen. That's just my 2 cents.
I think that's very good 2 cents. Zero mansplaining, please. Moving right along, the next push road question is from Mark Bradford, who is also a avid listener, and operates an excavator himself. He wants to know, what do you put in your lunchbox and keep it edible in the afternoon whenever you eat lunch?
Okay, well, this is where I throw everybody for a loop when I say I don't eat lunch.
What?
I do not take lunch to work. I know. I'm very.
I feel like that's a very definitive answer.
Yeah. I take my water in my backpack. That's about it. But if I did take stuff to work, it would probably be something simple like a turkey and cheese, and I wrap, and I probably wouldn't refrigerate it. It'd probably be all gross by the time I eat it because I'd forget the ice pack or something.
Okay, we'll do one more, third bonus, since you don't take lunch, which is cool, which I respect. I definitely respect.
Right, I'm just being honest.
All right, Mike Thomas asks, what kind of bike are you riding nowadays?
All right, so for downhill, I have it's a Kona Operator CR. That's the bike that I typically race on. And there's others. My trail bike's a Kona Process X, and I have a Kona Jake the Snake CR for a cross bike. and a giant STP for a dirt jumper. So it's kind of like there's 4 bikes for you, but those are the main bikes that I ride.
Kristin, thank you so much for participating in today's Push Road Questions of the Day.
The Push Road Question of the Day.
We haven't even talked about your mountain biking career yet, and I do want to dive into that. I think Taylor Zink has a really good question for you on that one, so we're going to do another 1-2 punch with special guests. Taylor is the supervisor for the terrain parks at Killington, so I know we just had Corey on the show, so big shout out to Taylor for contributing too. Here we go. We'll play it for you now.
Yo, Blade Dive. Taylor here, calling in from Killington. Parker, Kristin, so stoked you two are taking the time to chop it up, and thanks for taking my call. Kristin, Sparkles, you have stood on quite a few podiums over the years in both BMX and downhill racing. That's quite the accomplishment as competition is fierce, especially here in the Northeast. What qualities as a racer looking to land on the top step have bled over to your operating career, and how has it helped you not only better your personal skill set, but also motivate hand crew, fellow operators, and lead your team through the daily challenges that we face as trail and park builders working for a resort? Also, would you rather have excavator arms and digging buckets for hands, or cat tracks instead of legs, and why? Looking forward to flying bikes with you again soon. Peace.
That's an awesome question, Taylor. That is awesome. Well, I mean, I think some of it goes back to what I was saying earlier with having confidence in what you're doing and believing in what you're doing, because I'll be the first one to say downhill mountain bike racing takes a little bit of insanity to do. You're kind of blindly hoping that everything goes right. Like you have faith in your abilities and your bike and whatnot, but I'm the first one to say I've ended up in the helicopter on the way to the hospital before like anybody else. So
Wow.
yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, see, because that sport scares me more than snowboarding does, man. Yeah, it does.
It definitely is. I mean, that's what I love about it. I love the rawness. I love, you have to have confidence. And even with the most confidence and ability and the best machine under you, it can go wrong. But also, like that accident that I brought up, I just was doing something for the wrong reason. I was actually riding a section way too fast because I knew that's where the crowd was going to be. That was where the focus was. The pictures were going to come from there. The hype was going to come from that section. And you know what? I lost in practice. It wasn't even in the race, that I got hurt. And where I'm getting at with that is I wasn't focused on the end goal of consistent speed. I wasn't focused on getting to the finish line is a lot faster than laying on the ground. And being in the bloopers reel isn't all that great. So that being said, like I would say the patience and knowing when to push and knowing when not to push and pacing yourself throughout a season or pacing yourself throughout a build or whatever that is. And if you need to walk away, like we went to earlier, like you know when to walk away or when to back off a hair. Because running a machine full tilt for 24 hours straight is probably not going to get you the end result that you want. And the same is true with your body. The same is true with your mind. You'll push yourself past a breaking point and you start making dumb mistakes. So like what I would say is, taking on the task at hand and pacing yourself through the entire project. That's probably one of the biggest things. And that's how when I'm trying to figure out a race run, I've had people already go, well, you weren't going fast in that section, but I might have been first or second or third and I'm on the podium because I was consistent. It wasn't for that one moment when you saw me and the camera was on. It was for the overall picture. And I would say that's probably the best way I could answer that question, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Do you think that as you operate and build a course in the excavator that you're thinking about how how much is this? Do you think that your building of courses for bike racing in an excavator allows you to kind of have a really broad perspective of how maybe you would approach certain features on a bike? So let's say, for example, you build a really fun run. As you build it, just as you would in a snowcat, are you laying out kind of in your head, oh, I'm going to take this line, I'm going to set my edge here, versus where on a bike you're probably going, I need to probably slow down here, need to have my brakes ready here, how am I going to land here if I have this speed? Are you doing that in the excavator too?
I'm doing that in the excavator, and I even do it on snow. Like, I think one of the other things I could say is getting out of the machine is really eye opening. Um, I'm usually working completely alone in the middle of the woods where nobody even knows I'm there. But I'm not afraid to hop out and take my hands like I'm holding handlebars and approach something as if I'm riding a bike and walk through the radius of a turn or walk a section and just feel where the natural flow is. Because you can, even without like a clinometer or anything, you can feel down pitches and you can feel how banks are going to hold you. Now, obviously, like, I'm coming from the background of understanding how the bike works, the suspension, everything else. But I just get out of the machine and I look at stuff, and that's kind of how I lay out a bike trail. And it also depends on the user. Like last year, I spent most of my summer building almost a 4-mile beginner trail, which I actually had to take myself completely out of, because I had to think of how would I approach this if I didn't know how to enter a turn properly? How do I exit this turn without understanding how to exit this turn properly? And how can I make the trail almost like terrain-based learning style, in a sense of I want the rider to at least be kept on the trail naturally by the trail itself. I don't want the rider to have to put input into it to actually get the end result of what they're looking for.
Do you feel like that ability separates you from other operators just on snow and on dirt? Because don't get me wrong, there are people that definitely step out of the machine and visualize what's possible for the person that's riding on the snow. I mean, that's what we've discussed that before, but I don't know how many people actually visualize that. It's a piece of empathy, I guess is what I'm getting at, to use a one-word answer. You're placing yourself in somebody's shoes and you're understanding their constraints. They may or may not know what that turn is like or what that jump is like. Do you think that maybe is what separates you from other excavator operators?
I think there are a lot of people that do it, but I think they're also more of the successful people in that game. I don't know why people. I don't want to call it laziness, because I don't think it really is. But I don't know why more people don't get out of the cab or don't get out of the machine and really look at it from the perspective that you would see it on a bicycle, or skis or snowboard, whatever it is. I do think that it might help me. I don't know if that sets me apart, because everybody has their own unique way of doing things. And to say there's one way that's right and one way that's wrong, I definitely struggle. Like that trail that I built last year, I went in and had to fix 2 of the corners because they weren't holding people the way they were. It's not like everything, even standing there, is going to look the same way it's going to ride. But if you put the attempt in and you really like try to take a second, and maybe it takes a half a day longer, sometimes that goes a long way in the end product versus, okay, well, I think that's good. I'm not even going to step out of my machine for the next 8 hours. And when I go home, hopefully it's good. I just never want to be on that same page.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think people do step out of the machine and take a look at things. When it's a job and there's a time constraint and there's a deliverable there, it's kind of hard to envision that for I think for some people, because they're going, well, I'm here for 8 hours and I'm trying to get out of here. Maybe that's what I'm getting at. Is your understanding that it is more than just a job, that there's definitely maybe a reflection of your final product, and your ability to have somebody come up to you stoked and say, I love that course. Thank you. Does that separate you? Have you ever received feedback like that you feel like may separate you from others as excavator operators?
I almost look for it. I think it was Chloe's last episode she was like, I almost can't sleep some days until I hear how something that's new road that I'm still even questioning myself, where I'm like, it looks good. It felt good grooming. It felt good with the blade work. It felt good with everything. But I didn't put my skis on, or I didn't grab my bike, And a lot of times, like I used to when I was younger, always be the one to test stuff. And now, as an older person that doesn't always want to take risks on icy terrain or whatever it is, I don't always get to be the first person. So I'm getting like the secondhand information, and I'm okay with it being, it stinks. Like I'm going to take it a little like, oh, that sucks. But the truth is, like sometimes the truth hurts, and I'd rather know and go, okay, well, there's a little bit of a kink in this transition tonight. When I come in, I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to figure out how to fix that. Or this jump on a bike is making the suspension rebound way too hard and it's shooting people forward. Whatever it is, it could be anything. I want to know it so I can go, okay, well, there's something that I didn't see and I need to process why. And if I can take away that from fixing that problem, the next time, maybe I'll get it right the first time.
Yeah. That's just an interesting kind of like selfish question that I have of you, just because I see what you do and what you work with up there and the product that's out there at the end of the day that you produce. The fact that you can ride it is really rad, because on a bike, I think I would be the opposite. It's like, yeah, it's cool. It's amazing. I'm in this machine that's building and pushing around dirt. I have no interest in riding it. Maybe that's my own fear I got to get over of mountain biking. But
Hey,
maybe
you always got to keep going.
yeah, I think that's maybe my own fear of mountain biking. And to that, maybe I'll go this way with like the best and worst trends. What do you think in the bike world with mountain biking trails and their construction, or riding offerings that resorts have? What do you think are some of the best and worst trends in that realm of things?
Wow. All right. Well, one, I'm a little opinionated on, but it's kind of the best and the worst all at the same time. There's some newer trends and how any trail is built, a lot more low level, a lot less steep. That's kind of considered the proper way of building a sustainable trail. And I work at a place where we don't really have dirt. Like you said, it's rock, big rock, little rock, small rock, and then maybe you find a little bit of clay in a pocket for 100 feet. That's what I deal with. So like erosion is a big concern. Our terrain doesn't naturally hold together. It's a constant battle of rock. If you build it right, it holds up a heck of a lot longer with a lot less hand maintenance, in this lower level, lower pitch design concept. Now, I will say this: I'm a little bit more of, I like a raw trail. I like jumps to be fast. I like speeds to be high.
What do you mean by raw trail? Like not much done to it with the machine?
Okay, maybe I used the wrong word. I do, obviously what I race is very raw. Now it's funny because my job is to make it almost as polished and tame as it can, when I'm in a machine. So I guess what I'm saying is there's a cookie cutter mentality when it comes to mountain bike trails. And building a sustainable trail is one thing, but building a trail where people don't have to think on how to learn it, I also kind of have a slight problem with that. Some of these trails even put people extremely high in the air, naturally and without much effort. But I guess where I'm getting at is there's like, if you make things too easy for the rider, I feel like it puts people into a situation where they might not have the proper bike handling skills if something starts to go wrong. So, say the jump takeoff feels the same as a 20-foot jump, but now you're going 50. But you take off and you instantly start to nosedive.
Yeah.
If you're an intermediate or an early level rider that's confident and they're okay with speed and they're okay with jumping, but haven't really learned the fundamentals yet, now you're putting someone very easily into a situation that they could get seriously injured on. Because 20 foot, you might get lucky. 50 foot, you probably won't get lucky. I don't know where I want to go with it completely, but I feel like there needs to be a little bit more technicality on a trail like that so that you kind of keep people that might not be at the right level for it, but have the ability to gain the speed, to keep them in a way that they have to learn the trail before and learn things at a fundamental level. It's a really difficult balance because, like I said, you want to build a trail that holds up and you want to build a trail that's popular, but you also, I just fear there's a trend of sending people flying almost in terrain park size features on bicycles that don't comprehend what it is to recover from something.
I'm having so much fun right now.
Me too.
We've discussed a lot of training on the podcast. We've talked about it a lot. I view it as an important piece that is not discussed enough. I think that there are places that could have better programs in place to be able to teach somebody. We've had people come on the podcast and advocate for a want for more training. Lots of people have also come on the podcast and talked about training in a manner that is on the job, and it doesn't necessarily need to be a formulated thing that's offered to either graveyard or swing or during the day employees that operate a snowcat or an excavator or what have you. But I kind of want to pitch the question like this. Beyond what we've kind of talked about already earlier on in this conversation, what are some other teachable moments that maybe you've had in your career? And maybe how have those moments showed either people around you or developed your teaching style when you do have to step to the plate and kind of show somebody the way?
I can't pinpoint any specific thing. My biggest thing is, you know what, I make mistakes like anyone else. And if I damage a machine or something like that, I have the back and forth with my mechanics to be like, look, I pushed it beyond its limit, or I did whatever it was, I made that mistake. And I hope that that broadcasts clearly to my other coworkers. And I'm not 100% sure, but I think I have the most years, not that that matters, at my current crew. So I would hope that me taking on that, like, all right, I effed up, this is my mistake, and owning it kind of translates over to them. And when, to kind of bridge from that, like when there's somebody that's truly green, like really comes out, they're timid, they're having trouble, whatever, I always tell them, like, don't be afraid to mess something up. Don't be afraid to dig a hole. Don't be afraid. Treat the machine with respect. But like, don't be afraid to tear up this run because you're going to learn from making mistakes. And it's going to be you're going to become a better operator. So like, don't stress out that I, like myself or one of the other cat operators from the mountain's going to come over and go, oh my God, what the hell did you do? Because we're going to go, okay, well, we need to move the snow this way and move the snow that way. It'll be fine. This is, every night we just want you to do this and mess it up. And eventually you'll see what we do to put it back together and you'll be able to fix that problem and, and learn from it. I think that's how you need to train operators. I don't, there has to be a time limit where somebody has to be able to pick up something in a certain amount of time. Whatever that is, it probably pertains to like what resort you work at. But like, I'm very open with people, and I'm sure my mountain manager wouldn't appreciate it at all times, but I'm like, go mess something up and then ask us for how to fix it. I'm not going to necessarily come back and fix it, but I might show you how. And be real, like share your, failures. I definitely do. I have stories from, say, the jump you brought up earlier. Like I've shared that with people and I'm still embarrassed to this day by that. But like it comes around, like, and hopefully when they hear somebody that is an experienced physician go, you know what, I'm human. Here's what I've done wrong. Here's my advice. Please listen. Beyond that, that's all you can do. You can give them the tools, you can give them all the time and space you need. But at the end of the day, like, they're going to make mistakes. You have to let them make mistakes.
If there was ever, like, maybe you invented it or somebody pieced it together and there was a training program that was a bit of a traveling circus, that roved around and kind of either sat with people or showed people how to do things, do you think that people would invest in something like that?
I think if it was marketed correctly and the right approach, like I think it's easier said than done with that one, especially when it comes to getting somebody to put the money out there. Um, but I mean, if you really have a product, that you believe in and it's structured right and it's marketed right, because I mean, let's face it, even the best programs in the world without marketing doesn't get you anywhere. If you cover all those bases, then you're going to possibly have a success. I think in this business, it's very hard to have any type of consulting. Like, there's the ones that have done it and done it very well, but then there's the people that I think have struggled, and maybe it's struggled from an outward perspective because I'm not the one doing it, and maybe to them that was like the be all end all. Maybe they were killing it and loving it, and that's all that matters because at the end of the day, it's their business. Um, so I can kind of market it into or put it into like a consulting kind of thing. I don't know if it would be successful. I think it's a great idea. I think, especially maybe even if it came from, say, a manufacturer of snowcats or equipment, and was like, I don't know 100% about it, so I'm not gonna like put myself out there. But like, I know there's the Pro Academy, I believe, with Piston Bully. I'm sure there's other programs with other manufacturers, maybe Caterpillar or whoever. But is it enough? Or is it geared to an upper tier operator already? Um, that's a good question. I think it could be successful, but you really need to have the plan and the direction right off the bat with it.
Yeah, I think it, just to kind of run with you on that one, I think it could be successful if it wasn't something that was marketed in a manner of, look at me, I will be here with you for a very short period of time. I will show you the way, and then I am out. It doesn't. I don't think it could. I don't think it could be that way. I think it would be, you're invested in literally 1 to 2 places, 1 to 2 locations in close proximity potentially, and you're working hand in hand with those operators that are either experienced and want to learn more, or they are green and don't know much. And you've got, I think, at minimum 2 people, and I think you're doing the nightly thing. It's almost like you're an additional operator, but your responsibility isn't necessarily to go and build the stuff. Your responsibility is also to sit with the individuals too. I don't know how all that would play out. I definitely see we've got obviously our turnover in the industry is a very high percentage. That's affected by a lot more than just training, but previously places like to sell ambiance and experience and the culture as kind of a selling point to take a job. But I think knowing where you can go within a company is just as important. And if you don't feel like you've really been set up for success by knowing your job description, what's possible for the future for you in the career that you've chosen to pursue with the company, and how much opportunity you're going to have within the next couple of months in the season that you're in. What does that train of progression look like? So I think it's a lot of expectation management can set up in advance so that people feel like they are a little bit more valued. But that training piece seems to keep coming up. And I wanted your take on it because you do both machines really well. And you also ride both surfaces really well. You've been several different places riding, and you've been different places building. So, yeah, I just wanted to know your 2 cents there on that.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a cool idea. That's for sure. Just right approach is, I think, does anything in the world with the right approach, it could be very successful.
Well, as I mentioned, this episode is stacked with special guest questions, and I've got another one for you from Olivia Rowan, who is the editor of SAM Magazine, Ski Area Management Magazine, and she made an appearance on Isabel's episode and was grateful for that contribution, and so I'm excited to have Olivia contribute to Kristin's episode. So, Kristin, I will go ahead and play that for you now.
Alrighty.
Hey, Kristin. I have such fond memories of you from the early years at Cutter's Camp. You were a fixture at both the Eastern and Western camps, and what I remember is you were always eager to contribute to the conversations and sponge up as much knowledge as you could. I also remember you for your bright outfits, and I think we even gave you an award at the final dinner, the Skittle Stoke Award, I think it was called, for your enthusiasm and colorful outfits. So, but to my question. the ratio of male to female park managers and operators is still very weighted to the lads, but it's slowly changing. And you were one of the early female trained park professionals. And so, what advice would you give female operators who want to make a career out of this? And what can a resort do to make their park programs more welcoming to diversity?
Wow. All righty. Well, first off, I would say you have to be a bit of a strong individual. And you have to be able to let things fall off your back. You're going to get criticism even if you're 150% perfect. And that's not right, but that's kind of how it is. It goes back to what I was saying about being confident. Know that what you're doing is right. Be confident in your moves. Talk to people with respect. Hopefully, they come at you with respect. Let your actions demand that respect that you want. It's easier said than done. I definitely messed up along the way with it. It was a very new thing to experience, but it's very real. I also think you got to hire women to have them become management. That you don't have to hire them into a management role, but the people that are strong managers and strong leaders will show themselves if you allow it. But if you look at them as lesser, it's going to always come out that way. So you have to approach it as everybody's equal. Everybody is coming in at the same level in your mind. And that's a way of thinking. That's not actually something you can just magically do. I think we're all ingrained with different points of bias. But if you come in and you actively try and not just say because, I'm here for diversity and I'm here for this, that, and the other thing because it sounds good, and you actually take the approach of, no, I'm going to restructure the way I think. And that's on a personal level. Unfortunately, the managers above that person need to see it that way. And hopefully that increases the numbers in the industry. That's probably the best way I could see it. But confidence is key. Work hard, be professional, and be accountable. Like I said, it's okay to make a mistake. We're all human.
Yeah, that's very well put. Holy cow. That was an incredible answer. I was very humbled that Olivia wanted to contribute, and she has a whole lot of respect for you. You should know that, and I think she pretty much conveyed that in her question. So big shout out to Olivia for contributing for sure.
Absolutely. Thank you, Olivia.
Let's do a 1-2 punch with Ken Gator as the next special guest question. So here we go. Ken Gator, Snowshoe, West Virginia.
What's up, Blade Dive from the WV? Ken Gator here. Say hi to Parker and Kristin. How are you? Couple quick questions. One is, looking back to the earlier days at Cutters Camp, what did you take away that was most valuable to you? I'm curious, after some time's gone by, whether it's things you're able to share or things you're able to learn or the camaraderie, what stuck with you after all these years? And then question number 2, probably more importantly, are you still rocking vividly colored shin length zip up hoodies? The world has to know. Thank you, Kristin. And Parker, thank you. This has been a really inspirational project, and I know all of us that are into it want to say good on you, and keep up the great work, sir. Bye.
So to answer that part of the question, I would say occasionally. I because I still own all those hoodies, and occasionally I have to go out and look like a Skittles park kid. But I mean, the other part of it is the bright colors that everybody talks about. Like, I don't know, it makes me happy, so why not? But the hoodies were a bit obnoxiously fitted. I'm not gonna lie, they were a bit large.
Do you think so? I don't know. I feel like that was it was cool. I thought it was cool.
I think it was cool for sure. But now when I put them on and I'm like, wow, this is to my knees. I don't know if this is a hoodie or a dress at this point, but it makes me laugh, and I still get a smile on my face when I put it on, and people still have that weird look when I walk in the room, and they're like, "What are you wearing?" And I'm like, "I don't even know, but it's fun."
Yeah, going for it. Send it, full send.
Absolutely.
That's rad.
It's funny that came up in conversation. So okay, backtracking. What was the question again before the first part?
Sorry, yes, Cutters Camp, you being a part of it in the early days, and anything that you took away, your experiences there, maybe something that you learned, but something that was valuable to you nonetheless, irrespective, from the whole experience.
Probably one of the biggest things that I took away was almost on a personal level. Yeah, I think not everybody, but a lot of people, when they get into park building, especially maybe in that era, there was definitely an ego. Whether you liked it, whether you didn't, it still came with it. And I don't even necessarily, I can say reasons why, but I don't know. And I always try to keep it in check or hidden, but it probably did come out at times. And when I go to Cutters Camp, say the first year, we'll say, I definitely felt like it was more of a competition than what I made it out to be. It was more of a competition than a learning environment, and I didn't learn more than I came there to learn. Like I went out there wanting to learn how to step pipes properly, and truthfully, I took that away, and I didn't take a whole lot more than friendships, and that's great. I'm value these friendships. Obviously, I've known some of these people 15 going on 20 years, and they're great people. But why was I going there and having an ego? And why was I going there and trying to turn something that's a positive learning environment into a contest? Because I was young. That's the only thing I can chalk it up to. I can say this: the second time I went was a very different experience. I had a lot to share, and I also had a lot to take in, and I listened instead of thinking I knew everything. Which my first year at Cutters Camp, I believe, was coming out of my first year of building, managing, fabricating, all that. Like I had completely structured a program at that point, and I came out there with a big head. I was humbled. I was definitely like, wow, okay, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing. And I think having a whole year to reflect and then another season to institute some of the things that I did see at Cutters Camp and start to understand it in the real world perspective. The next year I came out with a very open mind, an eagerness to learn, an eagerness to ask questions and hear how other people did it. So ultimately, I would say taking myself out of it the first year and the ego out of it the first year would have been the thing I took away the most, because you got to open your ears. There's more than one way to do it. There's more than one way to look at a problem. And, I needed to grow up. And I'm thankful I made it through my first year or two as a park builder and manager, because I made a lot of mistakes. And going to Cutters Camp and sharing them, and also seeing that, like, wow, I'm not God's gifts to parks by any means. I'm just somebody that pushes snow. I make shapes for kids to have fun on and smile on. It was a different perspective. I came away with so much more. That, and my advice for anybody going to Cutters Camp is behave. Because like there's definitely way too many late nights at Cutters Camp in my experience. So take it in, go to bed a little earlier, really absorb what you're there for, and leave the ego at home. And that's my advice to other people, but that was the biggest lesson I learned from it. And my favorite part of Cutters Camp was the opportunities where I did get to hop in with, say, like somebody that hadn't run a cat possibly ever before that time, which it was more rare, but there was occasionally people at Cutters that never ran a cat before. And hopping in with a fresh operator and sharing, even if it's a little bit of just, how to not get rollers when you're pushing in a push road. Just sharing that information is always fun to me.
Yeah, and we've talked about that before too, which I think is so powerful, being able to feel like you can actually share information. It sounds like you took a lot away from all those experiences you had at Cutters. It wasn't necessarily just one of the times that you went, because I mean, we've talked offline, and you have valued your time that you spent there. It's not like you went there and thought it was just a big hoorah and had a good time. Like, you literally had a goal when you went there. You got what you needed out of it, but you treasure more or less the friendships and the relationships that you built from those experiences, just like anything else. So again, like, mega level of professionalism there. I feel like if I was to surmise it, I could be wrong, but I think I
I
think
think you hit it on the head there. I
I,
mean, I have friendships that I hope
yeah.
are my entire life from there, and maybe I don't get to see those people very often. I mean, that's the ski business as a whole. But like, you know, I've known people that worked at resorts and now are working for manufacturers of snowcats, and people jump around, but they're still in the business. And I really value those friendships, and a lot of those people I wouldn't have ever met if it wasn't for Cutters. And the wisdom that I've heard from them, I would have never heard if it wasn't for that. I haven't been to a Cutters camp in many years. I definitely miss it, but like, I'm glad that I got to experience as many as I did in the time frame where I was able to go.
From the folks that I've talked to about being special guest questions, obviously we've worked together, co-workers that we've shared at June. There were a lot of just positive comments about who you are as a person, and the impact that you've made. And whether you want to believe it or not, that you've kind of challenged and changed what the stereotype is of an operator. Or I'm sorry, you've challenged and changed the stereotype of what a person should look like, be like, and also be an operator. But you've done more than that. You've accomplished things outside of the snow industry. I know you mentioned just a second ago that making a change can be a good thing, and whether that direction takes you out of the industry or not, maybe it's just a job change within the industry. But you've got other passions outside of the snow world, I'm sure. And I'm sure there are connections and family, etc., that are highly invested in those things as well with you. But what would you say defines you outside of the snow industry, that world?
All right, this is going to sound really simple, but two things. I fun, because life is way too short, and laughter, because life's too serious to not laugh at it. Um, Outside of I kind of go with wherever the wind takes me. I love to take adventures. I like to take road trips. I love aviation. I play airsoft with my girlfriend. We dress up like warriors and go out there and shoot at each other. It's a blast. I love mountain biking. It is part of my career at this point. But I love skiing. I love all these things, and they make me unique. But if there's some weird thing that some people would probably judge me for, I have no problem sharing it. I'm just like, yep, this is unique. This is different. I don't care if you don't like it, because it's for me. And 90% of the life, like, I did struggle when I was younger. Like, it was tough, and having some weird thing to do on a Saturday sounds like a really fun thing to me. And if I can make somebody laugh in the process, even if it might be at my own expense once in a while, that's all the payout I need. I like to make people laugh. And I think a lot of people that know me close understand that, but I don't even understand it. I just always have wanted to make people laugh. If I was probably better at it, I'd probably be trying to do some type of stand-up comedy.
That was my question. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever tried to pursue, like, like a comedy hour somewhere?
I have never tried.
I would be scared out of my mind to do something like that.
Oh, I would be too. I
would be scared shitless to stand up in front of an audience and try to make them laugh.
It would be fun though. I really do think it would be fun to try to structure. And I know you don't start out with an hour, but like, to start out with, like, let me get 5 minutes of quick jokes in that I can like work a room with. That would be really fun. But like you said, it would be nerve-wracking. I would probably lose it in the process of trying to get up on stage and do that. But it would be fun because, I mean, I've always enjoyed making people laugh.
That's awesome. Yeah, I don't even know if I could, like, if you put it to me and you were like, hey, let's make a bet, $100, or maybe it's, $100. You will not go do a stand-up comedy hour somewhere. I'd be like, ooh, yeah, you're probably right. I won't. I don't know if there would be an amount of money. Oh, yeah. Because I think my rebuttal would be, you're effectively paying me $100 to go tell bad jokes for like 10 minutes. I don't know if I can endure that. But there's got to be something powerful, like if those were bad jokes and the audience was like boo or whatever, or they didn't laugh, that it would transform you as a person, maybe for the better. I could be wrong.
But I mean, that's no different than in the workplace. Sometimes you get booed and you have to take away what you take away. And sometimes you have to realize it's not always exactly what they're doing. It's a small piece.
Yeah, there are all kinds of little like subtle nuances that I think that we don't pick up on as employees, because there are several instances I feel like where we as people, especially in the park world, are just, it's kind of like the Instagram thing. It's like, look at this picture, look at this thing, look at what's going on, and then all these people around the world have this reference point of somebody. But like if you were to take the pictures every single step along the way of the process, instead of just posting that final picture, I think you'd probably get, like you're saying, you might get booed.
Yeah.
And nobody really wants to expose that piece of it. I don't think ever. I think it's very few and far between that people actually post.
I won't lie. Like, I can't say that I've never done a time lapse. Honestly, I've have the equipment to do it. I'd love to do it. I just, when I get out to work, it's about work. I do, as you know, I Insta story processes.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's cool.
I like it. I love sharing what actually goes into building stuff. Unfortunately, a lot of those pictures do not look like anything. I'm well aware of it. And then sometimes it's great, but that's the process, and I have people that message me and they're like thankful that I do show some of that. And then I have people that message me and go, when are you going to show the good stuff? And I'm like, well, that might be 3 weeks from now of what I'm working on.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I enjoy the ones that you show of the mud where it looks like little, like a slap dump, like back in the day where like coal mining towns.
It's very similar. I mean, honestly, the best way I could translate it to the snow world with what I work with at Blue in the summertime is, if you're building a pipe with a mixture of man-made and regular snow, you want to move it a distance so that it processes it together. And there's a process to that. Like for me, I have to remove the top 18 inches and then I have material under it. So it's not that much different in the concept. I'm processing the material. It's just a different material than snow. And yeah, that it is frustrating, especially if you hit a rock vein, because you're like, I just need dirt right now. I need dirt right now. And all I have is just boulders.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. I want to jump into Ty Fox's question. So let me do that.
Yo, Kristin. I have 2 questions for you. The first question, for you being out west at June Mountain, moving back home to Pennsylvania here, once being in charge of park crew, going back to grooming, and then eventually going back to being the builder, how was that for you in your life through all that transition, through all those different positions on the mountain, and what that meant to you? My second question for you, when you transitioned into the person you are today, how was it for you knowing that there is people in this industry that will support you and even have your back when you needed it, and how that feeling was for you, knowing that people are understanding? And if you want to get into it and you want to tell the story of where the $50 bet comes from, I know I'd love to hear it. Take care, and talk to you soon, Kristin.
I'll leave it short and simple. There was a fellow employee at one time who had a problem with me, and Ty was always wagering that he had $50 on me. Now, it never went down, but that was what the $50.
Sweet. See, it was going to be like a left hook.
Kind of. I mean, I'm not a violent person, so Ty was going to hold on to that $50 for a long time, but he always was trying.
Gotcha. Oh, Ty.
Yep, that's Ty for you. So the first part of that question, some of that's already kind of been gone over, but the part of it that is good to talk about would be going from a park management role to a builder role. Whereas I gotta say it was one of the best, and at the time I thought it was one of the worst things. But it was one of the best things for me because though I love organization and I actually like doing payroll and all that type of stuff that nobody really likes to do. The hard part was I was having trouble connecting with a lot of the people we hire were in high school. And the older I got, they were still in high school. Um, and it was a really tough thing. Some people I'm sure are great with dealing with that age difference. I really struggled with it. I had a hard time connecting, and every year seemed to get worse. Um, wasn't their fault. I mean, they're living their life. They're their age. I mean, have fun with it, right? But I was struggling with that part of it. And coming back into building and running snowcats full time, whereas before it was kind of a part time gig for a build or anything like spur of the moment had to get done, I'd hop in a cat or daytime pushing or whatever it was, I would do it then. But running a cat again 6 nights a week, um, it's tough. You know, it was tough at first, but now I really value it. I think that's probably, I'm not saying I'll never have another management role in my life again, but currently it's really nice to disconnect from that and have your responsibilities and know what your responsibilities are, but also not be constantly thinking of 20 other things for other people to do. I can solely focus on building the best park I can and going home at the end of that day. And then I come back fresh the next day. I'm not going home going, okay, what can Bill do? And what can this person do? And how can that? And on top of that, what do I have to do? Let me separate kind of, which I never even other than at June I did, but like the at Bear Creek where I worked prior to June, I never slept. If I wasn't welding, I was grooming. If I wasn't grooming, I was running the crew and like ran myself into the ground. And I felt very similar, though it wasn't the same structure at Blue as a park manager. And keep in mind, I structured the program, so I kind of buried myself in that one. But being a builder definitely struck me as now more interesting. I take more away from it because I think I'm just focused on one thing instead of 101 things.
Well, I do want to ask one more question, and we drop this every show. I think it's great to kind of get the different perspectives, but where do you think, Kristin, that the future of the snow industry, bike industry, whichever industry you want to pick, I'd be stoked to know either one or both, but maybe it's the resort industry. Where do you see their futures headed?
To answer as easily as I can, I don't necessarily know. I do feel though that I feel strongly that there's going to have to be a very big restructuring. I don't know what the restructuring is going to look like, and I'm not like I guess the term would be a market analyst or anything like that. So I really don't know and what's trending, but I think a lot of places are pricing themselves out of business. I think it's been happening for a long time. I think it's a trend that started long before the people that are running the show now in a lot of places. I think it started then. And now we're seeing that like just building to the point where I think the price of entry is too high. I don't know what it looks like to bring it back down to a reasonable, manageable level, if it even could be a manageable level. But that's I think I don't necessarily know where the industry is going. I do think summer activities are major. I think between obviously global stuff, global warming stuff, and also just trends in general. Money needs to be coming in more 24/7 than just relying solely on a winter. And once that's figured out and what new trends form over the years and how they approach what it costs to actually do these things is where it will end up. But I know that's not answering the question directly, but that's what I see. I just see a massive restructuring, and everybody's going to be, I think, trying to change things quickly when they realize they need to.
Mm. Yeah, more of a reactional instead of a proactive approach to the bigger picture.
Right.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. Kristin, I've got our next special guest question for you. It's our last special guest question for the evening, and it is from Mr. Elijah Hamilton. I'm excited that he's contributed, and I will go ahead and play it for you now.
Hey, what's up, Blade Dive? Kristin, it's Elijah. Super stoked you're going to be on the show. Can't wait to listen to what you have to say. I got to see you a couple times last winter when I was traveling around the Poconos, and one thing that really stood out to me was how much people appreciate you. Not just as an operator, but as a quality person. One specific example that kind of stands out is Mike, the mechanic at Blue Mountain, who practically broke down in tears describing how great you are. I'm curious what tips you might have for other terrain park operators or new operators and how to break through to that crowd that can be notoriously difficult to communicate with. Was it the way you talked to them? Was it simply your operating prowess? What were the things that really made them believe in you and want to support you? My second question is very simple. Excavator or snowcat? I hope you're well. Look forward to listening. You guys have an awesome day.
Awesome. Hope to see you soon, Elijah. So I guess the way I'd answer that first part would be being real. I mean, I know I've been saying authentic all the whole night here, but really just being real with people and, having normal conversations. Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, you have to do this, you have to do that. Like, it could just be as simple as talking to somebody like a normal human being. And it's weird too, because when I came in, like I said before, people like tried to build me up because I was coming back from the West Coast, and that didn't make me any more special than anybody else in a cat. But people looked at it differently. And I think once they realized that like I was just like them, and I had bad days and good days just like them, and I talked to them on a human level, that went so far, and I try to be kind to people because I don't know what they're dealing with outside of work. Everybody has their problems, everybody has their thing, and they come to work, and sometimes that, I mean, for me, that can be their vent, that can be their getaway from what they're struggling with. So why add to it? Why be a jerk? Why make them feel insignificant or smaller? Like, build them up, praise good work. Even like, sometimes it's not good work. Sometimes it's seeing a little inkling or a little piece of, glimmer of hope that they are on their way to being a very successful operator or park crew member or anything. Whatever their job title or description is, if you see that glimmer of like a shooting star happening, let it happen. Don't cut them down. Don't, tell them like, well, this is great, but you got to really carefully throw the constructive criticism out there. Like, you need to give it or they'll never learn, but you have to well balance it, and you just have to treat them like a human, like you'd want to be treated yourself. And I don't like to be built up. So like, I'm just an average person and I treat them like they're just great average people. So I think that goes a long way. Like, if you blow too much smoke up their bottom, they're not going to believe what you have to say either. So it's a delicate balance, and I just try to walk that line of being a good person, making them smile, making them laugh occasionally when they need it, and go about that.
Sometimes that may come in the form of difficult conversations, and I think people are weirded out by difficult conversations. I really do. I think that if you approach somebody straight up and say, hey, here's my issue, let me present to you this issue, and you approach it from a pro manner of presenting the issue, I think a lot of people are kind of befuzzled by that. I think they really are. I think they're weirded out by that constantly, because you're not coming to them and going, here's why I don't like you. You're coming to them and you're saying, hey, I had a problem with this, but I'd like to talk to you about it because I'd like to figure out how we could still work together because I believe in what we're doing here. And when those types of comments are made, I feel like people get weirded out, and I don't know how we kind of work through that, but I think if you, like you're saying, if you continue to do that and show people that that's a possible way of communicating, that's a really good way to break through. That was a really good point, Kristin.
It doesn't have to be an aggressive confrontation. It can be just just a conversation. And I think that goes a lot further, because I've definitely been shut down in conversations, and I can tell you, I can remember those. But the ones where people came and like were great individuals and was like, here's the problem, can we work on it? I take that so much better. So I'd imagine other people take it so much better too.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100% for sure. 100%. Excavator or snowcat?
Excavator. Not that
Really?
Yeah, not that I don't love. I love snowcats. Don't get me wrong. That was like my dream machine to run as a kid. But I feel like an excavator is kind of like a scalpel, and the snowcat's a little bit of a butcher knife. Not that you can't be precise with either, but I think the range of motion and the positions that you can put an excavator in, pretty much can outdo a snowcat. But that's just my opinion.
I just want to take a minute, and I want to say thank you again for you taking the time to jump on here with me. It's a big ask, as you kind of experienced. Everybody has lives. And so we bob and weave and pivot and run audibles to try to make this all work with people's schedules. And so it means so much to me for you to make the effort. And I just want to say thank you so much for taking the time this evening to jump on the Blade Dive and talk with me about all things you. You're
welcome. And thank you, Parker, because since I heard you starting this up, I was so excited for it, because it's funny because you're one of the most like hyped, stoked people on this business and sports that I've ever met, and working with you is a real pleasure. So getting to do this is like revisiting old times. It's like a really good time. So thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
Huge thank you to Kristin Lenart for being this week's Blade Dive episode. Quickly just revisiting some of the things during the intro that I brought up. If you are a resort that wants to advertise on the podcast for operator jobs that you have openings for, you can do that on the podcast. It's pretty awesome. You can reference either episode 27 or episode 31 for examples, but it's a really rad opportunity for you to place your hiring managers in a position to speak beyond that job description. Really cool. It's kind of like, the interview before the interview. It's dope. And it allows people to really gain a sense of who they'd be working for. It's a big trust thing. It's a massive thing that we discuss on the podcast too, by the way. If that's something you want to do, you can reach out to us via email. It's thebladedive@gmail.com, or you can send us a message on social media @thebladedive. Okay, you know the deal. Don't be a dick. Please fill up your machine with diesel at the end of your shift.